Hi everyone, this is Arpad from Starpath Academy, and in this video I would like to expand upon the mechanisms behind how inflation makes you poorer if you're not prepared. So I think a lot of people still don't grasp how inflation makes them poor and how fast it happens and what's the scale it happens and what's the speed it happens at. And I know a lot of my followers handle some of the bigger concepts, but talking from experience, from my Romanian experience from the 90s, when I was still very young, and how my family went through hyperinflation in Romania in the 90s, I'll give you some examples how we kind of understood what was actually happening through some very basic concepts by maybe a couple of months in, because to be honest, the majority of people didn't even understand what was happening a couple of years into hyperinflation and how they were getting poor, because, well, it's just how they are, you know. And the very first thing that you need to understand about inflation is that the first wave of inflation, it might not be called hyperinflation, but that first wave is actually hits you the hardest. And everything beyond that is just taking away what was left. So when I'm talking about inflation and how I measure it was in time and in doubling times, just like how people measure like nuclear reactions, or how uranium or something like that loses half of its potency, I should say. So let's say gasoline price, the way I measure it, if by inflation, is how much time it took to double, and how much maybe another commodity, how much time it took to double. Or of course, in our case, it's not yet doubling, but in hyperinflation or in high inflation Romania, it was. And you could, if doubling is too long a period, then you could measure it like how much time it took to go up 10%, 30%, 50%. But whatever your scale is, you need to move that to all of the commodities so you can track how fast it grows from this to that and from that to that and so on. So to understand that, when gasoline is rising from $2 a gallon to $4 a gallon, you of course might go on Twitter and complain, and you might come here to my videos and ask questions, which is great, and I'll do my best to answer them. But you don't necessarily feel the weight of what just happened. And many people, write it off and don't even care about it. At least you're here, right? And eventually it will go, or of course it could go to $6, $8, and $10. And when it's $10, it hits that psychological level that, oh my God, gasoline is $10 a gallon, the world is falling apart. Well, the world already fell apart. You just wasn't woke yet. You were not awake yet. Actually, when it went from $2 to $4, you already lost half of your cash savings. when it went from $4 to another $8, you just lost half of what was remaining from your cash savings. And to understand this, let's say you have $20,000 cash in the bank. It's your savings account or whatever. That amount of cash used to buy 10,000 gallons. Now at $4, it buys half of that. So $20,000 in real terms, it went down to $10,000. And then it went from $4 to $8. That another halving went from $10,000 to $5,000. So at $5,000 remaining, basically I'm saying that with the new gasoline price, that cash savings that you had buys only enough that 5,000 would have bought you. But you see how your first half, the major chunk of your cash saving, was lost at the very first doubling. And everything else, it was just like dividing the remaining of the cake further and further. But people don't grasp the weight of this because you don't have a cash savings account set away just specifically for gasoline. But if you would be conscientious enough to, save for gasoline, and you would have, how some other people have health savings accounts, and you would have a gasoline savings account or something like that, you would know how much you got screwed just from going from $2 to $4. So basically, if you would have this gasoline savings accounts, you would know that you already got screwed over. But you don't have a gasoline savings account because, well, frankly, you're still rich and you're living in a rich country, and you don't have a gasoline savings account because gasoline per month is still a very minute percent of your total monthly income, right? So whatever that price is, however much you're spending on gas a month, maybe you're spending $100, and let's just make up some numbers up, $100, $200 per month. That is still a minute percent of your monthly income, right? So even though something down there that is very necessary for your life doubled in price, you don't care too much about that, because that just means you're gonna spend less on garbage you buy off of Amazon, right? From the other tail end. So yes, it feels uncomfortable, but you don't know how bad it is. Well, it's very bad, because if you would have a gasoline savings account, you would know how much it got drawn down, and that's just gasoline. And usually gasoline was very important for us to track in Romania, because that is the one thing that is absolutely going to draw more things with it, because everything gets shipped. Well, maybe not electronic experiences like what you're enjoying now, but most of the stuff that people bought, especially back then, got shipped, right? And the shipping cost goes up, everything goes up. Now, of course, that might be a minute percent of the total product cost, but it's something. And if it will trickle down, because let's just say the computer needs to be shipped, but then the copper that is in the computer was shipped, the chip that was in the computer got shipped, and it will eventually trickle down the production line, where that percentage is a lot. Same with coffee. right? And of course, I want to mention that, hey, thank you very much for everyone who have subscribed to buymeacoffee.com/starpath academy. And thank you very much for pushing this last goal through. And you know, we'll be investing more on audio equipment and video equipment. And I just wanted to plug a little thank you, and we're already doing that. So the goal was reached, and next step is going to be another interesting step in buymeacoffee.com and our Patreon. So thank you very much for supporting this channel. I am really thankful for you. Now back to inflation. So eventually we realized this a couple months in, as it was happening. I think that was our sort of luck. And you know, my father kind of calculated some stuff, like how bad it is actually, even though it's still just picking up. And it was picking up, you know, after 6 months, until it got to 2 years in full-blown hyperinflation in Romania. So what we did was, we of course were very poor already, you know, living in communist Romania, and now hyperinflation in Romania. So we didn't know too much about investing. We didn't know too much about many things that you know now, right? We knew about prepping somewhat, because that was just a way of life, you know, for us. Food shortages were on and off in communist Romania, so we kind of prepared for that anyway. Electricity outages was common, so we kind of prepared for that anyway. And it wasn't just us, it was a societal thing where you would know that you would have to have the pantry, if you could afford it, to have the pantry stocked for at least 3 months. Some 6 months, and some living in the country where it was a year probably. So in that case, that sense, we were more prepared than, you know, now the average person is. However, regarding investing or investment strategies, we didn't know anything about it, you know. But we knew one thing, which was we'll have to eat, right? And we'll have to prepare food, and we'll have to store food. So, and that is not gonna go away anytime soon. So instead of holding cash, right, in a savings account, which was closed anyway, eventually, it was the Czech, it was called CEC in Romania, the only bank we had, which was government controlled bank. Instead of having whatever money we have, leaving it there, we would pull it out, which was a good step, because those banks, or they were closed, right? The offices were closed, and whoever got stuck in with their money, they got stuck until for a long time. But what to do with the cash, because cash was losing value as well pretty fast, right? So I think we kind of took on ourselves that, let's just buy at least something. But what to buy? Well, we knew that storing food is going to be important for us, because it was always important for us. So we bought stuff that we would use for that. Of course, leave some cash, but eventually we figured out, well, how about sugar? You know, sugar is easy to store, and we use sugar for preserves and for baking, and everybody else who we know uses sugar for baking and some other stuff. So, and we had a sugar factory in our hometown, which was making sugar out of sugar beets. So this was the white crystallized sugar, and we just bought that. We thought, hey, you know, Just like how we would have that, I was talking about gasoline prices are going up. Maybe you would have a gasoline savings account, and you're seeing that gasoline savings account is actually buying less and less gasoline. Well, that's what we did well with sugar, because we would know how much, because we were poor, so everything was accounted for on paper, every dollar, every Romanian lei, where it needs to go. And let's just say, hey, we're actually able to buy sugar now because we have the factory. We assume that this will continue to go up in price. Let's just buy sugar for us for the next year, 2 years, because actually white crystallized sugar is very easy to store. Brown sugar is a bit different because it has molasses in it. You might need oxygen absorbers or something like that. Actually, for white sugar, you don't need that, because that would just turn it into a rock, because it would absorb the oxygen, and it would turn into a huge rock. So, but anyway, we figured out how to store sugar. We had the place, we had the opportunity to buy it. We knew that eventually, if nothing else, we could just give it away or sell it for acquaintances and so on, right? So we bought that, and we bought sugar, and we would see that that was sort of an investment, because we bought more than we would consume. Actually, we were cutting back on sugar, because you would want to consume less, anyway. So it was actually paying off for us as an investment, but it was actually physical sugar, right? A physical commodity. And what happened then was, actually we treated this truly as an investment, not as a stored sugar for us, because we bought more than we would want to consume. Eventually we just kept on buying because it was a good investment, and we still had some place to store it. But then, okay, so if we treat this as an investment, like, how would you deal with it? If you want sugar, would you actually just go and take how much you want and then just bake, or or make treats out of it for everything one? Well, no, of course, right? It's an investment. So, but we still wanted to consume some sugar for teas or coffee or whatever. Well, coffee was very rare. But okay, so we figured out, like, how would we do this? Well, let's just say that when we want some sugar, then we would either go to the store and buy it, or we would go to our storage place and buy it from there, from ourselves. So the store price was whatever the store price was, and our place for ourselves, how we were selling it, quote unquote, was actually the price we bought it at, plus maybe a little something. So that way, that forced us to, whenever we wanted to buy sugar, we would either put the money in the store, or put the money in a separate savings account for future investments, short-term savings accounts for future investments that we would actually drawing from our sugar storage, right? And well, eventually we figured out, well, of course, it was almost always cheaper now to go to the sugar storage that we had. So there was another rule put in place, so to speak, that you could only draw down your storage. First it was like 10%, then it was 30%, eventually 50%. But at that point, you could no longer buy sugar from your own storage, and you would buy it from the actual store. Now that forced us to kind of make strategical decisions where to go for the sugar if grandma wanted to bake. And remember, this was all sort of organic, like we made up these rules. I'm just telling you now in a compact way, but we kind of made these rules up as we kind of went along, and that's how we kind of started understanding about physical investments, right? Through sugar. So it's kind of interesting. Other things as well, but this was clearly more than we would ever consume. Right, so that forced us to make strategical investments, purchases, or decisions, I should say. Now, when prices go up, even during hyperinflation, they tend to go up in waves and in spikes and crashes and spikes. But you don't, a lot of people don't care too much about this, because at that point the problems are so big that whatever you just have some cash, you spend it immediately, because you know it will be worth less and less, so you want to spend it. So people don't accommodate for that, but it actually goes up in spikes, right? It almost never comes back to the place where it was, but it goes, maybe it triples in price or quadruples in price and goes back, maybe 50%, and then quadruples and 50%, quadruples. And these cycles could be long, short, and there are mini cycles within bigger cycles. Usually the cycle we kind of counted or watched for was the half-year cycle. That was long enough where we could use our own stuff, but also take a look at what happened. Well, we tracked almost weekly what happened, but that way we would have a historical perspective, half a year, what was happening. So this little strategy where we go for what we were consuming, in the example I just told you, sugar, what this did actually was, when there was a spike happening, right, we would cut those spikes down, because we would not be forced to buy products from the store during the spike times, or when there was very little availability of that good, and we would have that storage to draw from. But since that was limited, as the spike was coming down somewhat, we maxed out what we would be able to draw from, and then we started buying from the store again. So that kind of instead of, it would be sort of like dollar cost averaging it, but when the spike is long enough, you don't buy at all from the store. So it actually cuts it flat, whereas dollar cost averaging this would be sort of like a 200-day or moving average that you would be buying. We would actually have a better deal this way, because we would completely cut the spikes at least. And we would also have the ability to sell during these times, although we didn't do too much of that. But it was more important for us to help relatives first of all, my grandmother, my cousins, and even neighbors at that point. But what would help us actually was kind of understanding yes, it's bad, yes, things are deteriorating, but if you are smart enough and you can move stuff around, then you might, on this slippery slope of deterioration caused by hyperinflation, you will slide slower than the rest of the people around you. And then that gave us an edge to actually start purchasing bigger assets. Of course, this was this and many other things, but I thought this would be important to talk about, because a lot of people don't realize what's happening until X reaches a price of Y. At that point, psychologically is just too much for them, and then they realize. But most of the stuff you actually lost was that first doubling or first halving, based on what perspective you're looking from. And to understand this, on the opposite side of this, which Americans are probably more accommodated to is investing, right? Well, inflation is in reverse, but it's the same as if it would be investing. It was just in reverse, right? But if for investments, how come the penny stocks, you can get billionaire millionaires with penny stocks? Of course, I'm not saying you should do this. The risks of it are probably too much and it's not worth it. Consult with your investment advisor. I don't invest in penny stocks, but the reason is, of course, because it could be a penny per stock, right? And it goes up to 2 penny per stock, and it can go up to 4 penny per stock, and the world doesn't need to change for that to happen. Somebody writes an article, something picks up, and maybe a scammer wants to sell that penny stock or something like that, and then someone just doubled or tripled or quadrupled their money, and it doesn't matter how much they had in it. So the same with Bitcoin or other cryptos, that the very cheap ones, right? When Bitcoin was $100 and it went to $200, nobody bat an eye, other than who were actually following it. However, people who had a lot of money in there, they just doubled all of their money. But suddenly Bitcoin goes to, I don't know, $35,000, and everybody's going crazy. And now from 35,000 it goes to 45, and it's the end of the world. New eras kicking in, and it's awesome and it's amazing. And yes, it is, but to be honest, from 35 to 45, you haven't done that much. You would have made more from 100 to 200. So because you would have doubled your money there. So the same thing with inflation, but everything in reverse. So that is something to keep an eye out for, and to think about, because by the time it hits the media, or by the time it hits the major resource or news sources or whatever, that is just where it's the psychology of the people has been triggered. But that's already if you would have had a lot of cash savings, then you would have lost a lot of money if you're waiting for that point with inflation. All right, so I think I hope I was able to make some points here. Let me know in the comment section, and hey, thank you for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it.